Well, hey y'all. So tonight we're going to be talking about the first part of chapter 4 in the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I'm really excited about this chapter. I don't really remember anything from the first couple of times I read the book. It's been a long time, like 20 years. So I'm really excited about this chapter, and I hope that you guys are excited to dive in with me. It's actually where she's going to start talking about having a partner. And there's going to be a little bit of tie-in to how these concepts ring true for men as well. So, which I think the whole book can be relatable to men and women personally. But I just really hope that you get something from it and that you enjoy it. So, chapter 4 is called The Mate, Union with the Other. And then it talks about, and then the opening, like subtitle, I guess you might say, it's called Hymn for the Wild Man, and the story is Manawi, okay, that we're going to get into in just a minute. And I'm not going to read this story word for word, but I will kind of summarize the main points for you, okay? So I want to go ahead and read the introduction to chapter 4 for you all. Okay, if women want men to know them, really know them, they have to teach them some of the deep knowing. Some women say they are tired, already have done too much in this area. I humbly suggest they have been trying to teach a man who does not care to learn. Most men want to know, want to learn. When men show that willingness, then is the time to reveal things, not just because, but because another soul has asked. You will see. So here are some of the things which will make it much easier for a man to understand. For him to meet a woman halfway, here is a language, our language. This reminds me of, I can't remember the author's name. I think it was John Gray. And I think it came out like when I was a teenager, preteen or something. Women are from Mars, men are from Venus. Or, no, I'm sorry, men are from Mars. Yes, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, I think. But I don't know anything about that book. If I'm not mistaken, I actually read that too, but I was super young, and I guess I just didn't have enough life experience whatsoever for it to really make sense to me. I can't remember, so I can't really comment, but where she's, you know, I was reminded because she says, here is a language, our language. And I think that's true. I think that, you know, just like I've referenced John and Stacey Eldridge, you know, which are Christian authors, and they have, you know, different perspectives to very similar concepts about spirituality in a man versus spirituality in a woman, and how I think I referenced in one video, you know, we're fashioned after God, and how women, you know, bear certain qualities of the divine, and then men have different qualities, and it's so that to me makes us not the same, and that's by design, so that we can come together and become one in that manner, you know. And so I just think it's beautiful, and I'm really, I hope this chapter doesn't disappoint. I think there's actually more in the book as well. I think there's probably a good bit more specifically about, you know, relationships specifically, and so intimate relationships. So I'm looking forward to that, but hopefully this won't disappoint. Okay, so there's my tangent. Let's keep going. There is no doubt that the wild man seeks his own down under the earth bride. In tales among the Celts, there are the famous pairs of wild gods who love one another so. They often live under a lake where they are the protectors of the underlife and the underworld. From Babylonian mythos, the cedar-thighed Inanna calls to her lover, the bull plow, come cover me with your wildness. And even in modern times, even now in the upper Midwest, the mother and father of God are still said to roll about in their spring bed, making thunder. Similarly, there is no one a wildish woman loves better than a mate who can be her equal. Yet over and over, perhaps, since the beginning of infinity, those who would be her mate are not quite sure they comprehend her true nature. What does a woman truly desire? This is an ancient question, a soulful riddle about the wildish and mysterious nature which all women possess. So that's just a little snippet from the opening of this chapter. And then she goes into the story of Manawi. And it says that the version that she includes in the book is it's an African-American story. So just for that background, and again, I'm not going to read this word for word, but the summary of it is this. So there was a man who came to court two sisters, came to date two sisters. And the father, this is, you know, a lot of these old tales, they've been around for a long time, and they've passed through different cultures and, you know, polygamous cultures and things like that. So in this story, the father told the man, "You may not have them in marriage until or unless you can guess their names." So the man's name in the story is Manawi, the title of this story. And so he's trying to guess these women's names. And he'll, you know, leave and come back and try again the next day, and he's just failing miserably. So every time he leaves and comes back, he has this little dog, his dog, that comes with him. And the dog is really observant, you know. And it says the dog noticed that, you know, like one sister, they're different, you know, but they both have, you know, beautiful qualities. So like one sister is more, you know, physically attractive, and then one is sweeter. But, you know, he likes them both, and he really wants, you know, his owner to figure this out. And so the little dog, you know, sees how he's failing miserably to figure out the names. So he decides to help him. And so he sneaks up there and listens, the dog by himself, and after Manawi goes home, and he puts his ear, you know, up to their tent or home, whatever it was, I can't remember, and he listens to them talking, and he hears them call each other by their names. So he's real excited. So he runs back, you know, home to tell Manawi, you know, the names of the women, and he gets distracted. He smells like this amazing meal, and so he runs off, gets off course, and eats the meal, and then he's like, oh yeah, I gotta run back and tell Manawi. So he starts home again, but he forgot the names of the women. So he stops and he turns around, he goes back to their home, their tent, I can't remember, and a hut, they call it a hut, there it was. So he listens again, and he gets their names again. So then he starts back on the trail again, and he's derailed again because he smelt nutmeg like a pie. And so he's, you know, just enjoying that. And then just like dogs, isn't it? So he has to go back a third time and get their names again, and he does, and he gets their names again. By this time it's nighttime. So on his way back home to Manawi, he actually gets abducted by a stranger who, and I'm telling you all this because I'm not sure as we dig in later in the chapter if these little details are going to be meaningful in figuring this out. I don't know which parts are going to be meaningful, which is hard, you know, not reading the story word for word, but we'll get through. So it's nighttime at this point, and the little dog is back at the hut, and he's listening, and he gets the names again. He's really lucky, and so he's just totally determined he's going to make it back and tell Manawi the women's names. Well, like I said, this stranger grabs him up, and it's like, you know, the stranger wants the women's names because he's figured out what he's doing, and he's just demanding, and he's, you know, really, you know, being very abusive to the dog, and the dog's like biting down and clamping on this man's hand, and so they're fighting, and the dog wins basically. So the man like runs off, and the dog goes back and tells Manawi the names. And so like the next morning he comes and tells, you know, their father their names. And here's what's interesting: as the dog's coming and going back and forth to the women's hut, he notices that like they're not worried, they're not stressed about anything. They're like by the second visit, and he hears them and they're talking to get their names, they're I think like putting on lotion. It says like oiling each other's arms and legs, and it says almost like preparing for a ceremony. So they're getting prepared, almost like they know that this particular man is going to figure this out, and which I think is kind of cool, because I think that and I'm curious if other women viewers would acknowledge this. It's almost like you can kind of tell when you're in tune with that intuition, you know, if a man is going to meet you there or not. It's like an intellectual but yet deeper intuitive connection. And so it's like they just knew. They knew that this was gonna happen, and he was gonna figure it out. It's just kind of beautiful to me. So, but that's the story. And so I want to read to you a little bit of her thoughts on the story after the story. So the next section is called The Dual Nature of Women. And you know, when I read through this earlier, I was kind of thinking, to start with, I was thinking, like, to have a dual nature seems narcissistic. And if you haven't seen the other videos, that's the lens that I'm looking at all this through, is narcissism. When you've come out of a narcissistic entanglement. And so, like, learning and growing your discernment from that experience, and just expanding your understanding of how these very deceptive people operate, so that you don't get, you know, caught up again. But I was thinking the dual nature of women, I'm thinking, you know, people shouldn't have a dual nature, period. Like, you should just be your authentic self all the time. But I think there's more to it, and so I'm going to go ahead and present this to you and see what you think about it. So, and I'm not reading this word for word, I'm just picking out the highlights too here. So it says, the Manawi story contains all the essential facts for being close to the wildish woman. Manawi, through his faithful dog, guesses the two names, the two natures of the feminine. He cannot win unless he solves the mystery, and he must use his own instinctual self, the dog self, to accomplish it. Anyone close to a wild woman is in fact in the presence of two women. It talks about an outer being and an interior creature, one who lives in the topside world and one that's not so easily seeable. It says, the outer being lives by the light of day and is easily observed. She is often pragmatic, accultured, and very human. The creature, however, often travels to the surface from far away, often appearing and then as quickly disappearing, yet always leaving behind a feeling, something surprising, original, and knowing. Understanding this dual nature in women sometimes causes men, and even women sometimes, to close their eyes and hail heaven for help. The paradox of women's twin nature is that when one side is more cool in feeling tone, the other side is more hot. I mean, I'm thinking of hormones at this point, as far as the cool and hot. When one side is more lingering and rich relationally, the other may be somewhat glacial. Often one side is more happy and elastic, while the other has a longing for I know not what. That's in quotations, I know not what. One may be sunny, while the other is bittersweet and wistful. These two women who are one are separate but conjoined elements which combine in thousands of ways. So, I mean, I have to know more beyond this, because still it's not super clear to me, other than through the lens of, since we've been talking about intuition, the lens of, you know, connecting to that like introverted, reserved, quiet, observant self, where you're consulting, you know, the times where you're consulting with your inner voice, your inner guiding light, where you've kind of pulled away from the world, the bustling aspects of, you know, day-to-day life. You may kind of come off a little different when you're, you know, trying to figure something out, or you're just in tune with that intuition, and you're spending that time consulting or praying, you know what I'm saying, versus just your normal functioning self, where you're fully present, you know, in the moment with whatever you're doing hands-on. That's kind of how I'm seeing that, but, you know, I really need to know more, so we're going to go further. The power of two is the next section, okay? And so she goes into talking about twins. And I'll go ahead and read the opening paragraph here. It says, while each side of a woman's nature represents a separate entity with different functions and discriminate knowledge, they must, like the brain, with its corpus callosum, have a knowing or a translation of one another, and therefore function as a whole. If a woman hides one side or favors one side too much, she lives a very lopsided life, which does not give access to her entire power. This is not good. it is necessary to develop both sides. Okay, so then she's talking about like how twins, you know, have connections sometimes, and that's been proven. It's pretty cool. It's almost like otherworldly and spiritual, how, you know, like one twin can have like an experience and the other can feel it, and they can be totally across the world from each other and not have any kind of logical, there's no logical explanation for this kind of stuff. And I like kind of, you know, hearing those stories. So she mentions like some of that stuff, you know, through different cultures with twins. But these are two aspects of one woman, right? So she says, likewise, a woman has tremendous powers when the individual dual aspects are consciously recognized and beheld as a unit, held together rather than kept apart. The power of two is very strong, and neither side of the duality should be neglected. They need be fed equally, for together they bring an uncanny power to the individual. And then she talks about a man that she met in this park, and how he was the kind of man that just kind of walks around pointing his finger and talking to the wind kind of guy, right? And he's the one that told her this story. And it says, he called the story One Stick, Two Stick. And I am going to read this story to you. This is the way of the old African kings, he whispered. In the story, an old man is dying and calls his people to his side. He gives a short, sturdy stick to each of his many offspring, wives, and relatives. Break the stick, he instructs them. With some effort, they all snap their sticks in half. This is how it is when a soul is alone without anyone. They can be easily broken. The old man next gives each of his kin another stick and says, "This is how I would like you to live after I pass. Put your sticks together in bundles of 2s and 3s. Now, break these bundles in half." No one can break the sticks when there are 2 or more in a bundle. The old man smiles. We are strong when we stand with another soul. When we are with another, we cannot be broken. Likewise, when both sides of the dual nature are held together in consciousness, they have tremendous power and cannot be broken. This is the nature of the psychic duality, of twinning the two aspects of a woman's personality. By itself, the more civilized self is fine, but somehow lonely. By itself, the wildish self is also fine, but wistful for relationship with the other. The loss of women's psychological, emotional, and spiritual powers comes from separating these two natures from one another and pretending one or the other no longer exists. This tale can be viewed as being about masculine duality as well as feminine or female duality. The Manawi man has his own dual nature, a human nature and a dog nature. His human nature, while sweet and loving, is not enough to win the courtship. It is his dog nature, his instinctual nature, that has the ability to creep near the wildish women and with his keen listening hear their names. It is the dog self that learns to overcome superficial seductions and retain the most important knowings. It is Manawi's dog nature which has sharp hearing and tenacity, the instincts to burrow under the walls and to find, to chase, and to retrieve valuable ideas. I thought that was kind of cool. And then she goes into talking about masculine forces that carry Bluebeard-like or murderous type of energy. Like, remember the Bluebeard tale I told you about? Like, he's a bad dude. So, you know, we've all seen like how it can, you know, that masculine energy can be amazing and wonderful and super attractive and just great, and then it can be corrupt. And it's the same thing with women, you know. I mean, there's corrupt people, man or woman, but she's specifically talking about the masculine forces. And she says that these kind of forces, like the Bluebeard type, they're looking for perfection in a woman, and that's dangerous, you know. I did a real short video about, you know, someone, I've ran into several people like this, where they expect you to, like, they have this image in their mind of you that's not realistic, and they can snap if, you know, they realize, oh, you're actually human. And so it's just not good. And she says, if you meet this kind of person, run the other way as fast as you can, right? And it's getting dark on me again. I'm gonna have to I don't know, we're at 20 minutes. I may actually make a separate video, but let me finish up this little section here. So this is cool. She says, so Manawi wishes to touch this most ubiquitous but mysterious combination of soul life in woman. And he has a sovereignty all of his own. Since he is himself a wildish, natural man, he resonates to and has a taste for the wildish woman. Among that cumulative tribe of men in a woman's psyche, whose members Jungians, like Carl Jung, call animus, there is also a Manawi-like attitude which finds and claims a woman's duality, finding it valuable, courtable, and desirable instead of devilish, ugly, and to be disdained. This is important. Listen to all this, okay? So you have men that value the depth of a woman's soul, and then men who find it devilish, ugly, and to be disdained, right? We're going to talk about that. It says, Manawi, whether in the internal or external world, represents a fresh but faith-filled lover whose central desire is to name and understand the mysterious and numinous, remember that word, double in women's nature. I just think that's beautiful. I love the way this woman writes. So what I get from this is a toxic man. And you can reverse this and say this about a toxic woman. You can, either way. But a toxic man doesn't want his partner to be fully in her own power. He doesn't want that. So, anytime a woman is showing signs of being strong and courageous and brave, and, a man who is truly deeply insecure, but hiding it behind this false persona, a narcissistic mask, is going to want his partner to need him, like depend on him, like way beyond what's normal in a reciprocal, healthy relationship. And so a woman who's showing, that she's strong and can stand on her own feet, that's going to be a put off to him, and which is why narcissists break you down. And remember, you can reverse this, women or men. They don't want you to be strong. They don't want you to even be in the know. They'll keep things from you. They'll keep important information from you. Anything they can do to break you down. And that's how I perceived that last paragraph there. But a true, what she calls wildish man is going to be attracted to the wildish woman. In other words, people who are authentic, who are honest, who loathe lies and liars, and who have a desire to grow, and who have this connection to the spiritual realm, and knowing that there's depth to, I was going to say to people and humanity, but I don't know that I could say that about all, right? Some are cut off. Some are cut off, and some are cut off from that deeper aspects of the soul on purpose, because if they didn't cut themselves off from the deeper aspects of their own soul, it would mean conviction for them. It would mean conviction, and they don't want that. So they just live at that surface level. Is this making sense? I hope it is. It's really, I'm processing with you all, and it just feels and rings so true to me after the experiences I've had. So I hope you got something out of this. I'm going to keep this one a little bit short, and then I'll come out with a part 2, which will be B, and in the chapter 4, I've got, I'll have A, B, C, whatever. I don't know how many it's going to take me to go through. We'll just see, but this will be A, and then we'll come out with B next. And so thanks so much for going along this journey with me, and I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Take care.